muscles. We talked about muscles in the tissue section, but we're going to get more in depth, and we're really going to focus mostly on skeletal muscle. The three types of muscle tissue are skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, which you guys should know. And the types differ in location, function, etc. There are some muscle similarities. Smooth and skeletal muscle cells are elongated. They're called muscle fibers. The cell itself is called a muscle fiber. And muscle contraction depends on these proteins called actin and myosin. And muscle terminology is also going to be similar in that we're going to use the same types of words when we're talking about all three different types of muscle. So the sarcolemma is the plasma membrane or the cell membrane of the cell in a muscle. Sarcoplasm is the cytoplasm of a muscle cell. So when you see myo or MYS or sarco, you're going to know that we're referring to specifically to a muscle. Now, skeletal muscle tissue is what we're really going to focus on in this chapter, how it contracts, where it is, and then we're going to delve into our dissection. So skeletal muscle tissue is going to attach to the skeleton, which we just studied. The skeletal muscle tissue has these stripes, and we looked at this underneath the microscope, and they have stripes called striations, and we'll explain what those are along the way. It is controlled voluntarily, meaning that you have to think about it in order to contract a skeletal muscle. It contracts very rapidly, but it does tire easily. So it will fatigue a little bit faster than your other muscles, and then it helps us move. Cardiac muscle occurs only in the heart. So it's made up of, or the heart is made up of cardiac muscle tissue mainly. It is striated, just like skeletal muscle tissue, but it is not voluntary. You don't have to think about beating your heart. It contracts at a very steady rate. It's called the heart's pacemaker. We'll get into that when we do the cardiovascular system. And it has many myoglobin, and myoglobin is a protein that can store excess oxygen so that the muscle, your heart muscle, never fatigues. Smooth muscle is found in the walls of your organs, so it's going to be in any of your organs within some sort of like tube, and it is going to force things through the body. It is not striated, that's why they call it smooth, and it's involuntary like cardiac muscle tissue. And it moves through a wave-like pattern called peristalsis. There are some functions of muscle tissue. So this is actually an essential question. So it's excitable, meaning that it's going to be able to respond to stimuli. It can contract. I think that that goes without saying. It can also extend. It can actually be stretched, and it does have some elasticity. And then the functions, it allows for you to move. Cardiac muscle is responsible for making sure blood is being pumped through your body. Smooth muscle maintains blood pressure and propels substances through organs. And then skeletal muscles maintain posture, stabilize joints, and then all muscles do generate heat as they contract. Now, skeletal muscle is quite complex, and the way that one contracts a muscle is quite complex. So there's going to be a lot of explanation as we go through the lectures and in class. So skeletal muscle is an organ, meaning that it is composed of different tissues. So it's composed of skeletal muscle tissue, blood vessels, nerve fibers, and connective tissue that wraps it and kind of holds it in place. There are 3 connective tissue sheaths. There's actually a 4th one that I will explain also. But for the most part, all muscles will have these 3 connective tissue sheaths. endomysium is always, whenever you hear endo, you're always going to think of inside. So the endomysium is going to cover a muscle fiber, and a muscle fiber is one muscle cell. So it's going to cover the smallest portion. A paramecium is going to cover a bundle of muscle fibers called a fascicle, and I'll show you guys pictures of these. And epimysium is going to be the sheath that covers the entire muscle. Some muscles on top of the epimysium will have something called a fascia, but not all muscles have the fascia. So this is what it looks like. You've got your bone, you've got your tendon that's going to be connecting the muscle to the bone. The epimysium is on the outside of the entire muscle. Then we have these bundles. You can see that there's a bundle, there's a bundle, there's a bundle, and we have a paramecium that is enclosing the fascicle or the bundle of muscle fibers. And then we have one muscle fiber sticking out here, which is a cell, and it is enclosed by something called the endomysium. Now, when we get down to the cellular level, so it's the muscle fiber, when we're looking at skeletal muscle cells, they're very, very elongated, and they're cylindrical. And so they have numerous, they're the only muscle that has many nuclei. They're multinucleated, that we learned that term a while back. And they have their normal organelles just like everything else. Now, they do have some unique parts to them, and one of them are myofibrils that we'll get into some detail with. So once we look inside a muscle cell, we have these things called myofibrils. And myofibrils make up most of the muscle volume. And they're going to be the parts of the muscle cell that's doing the contraction. And we're going to go into some detail on contractions. And so this next part, the arrangement of myofibrils within a fiber, it is aligned so that there are dark bands and light bands. And the dark bands are called A bands and the light bands are called I bands, and that's where we get our striation. So this is a picture. This is an actual muscle fiber, one cell. And so you can see it has nuclei, and then within it you have these myofibrils, which are little tubes inside the cell itself. And you can see that it has mitochondria, so it can produce ATP. And here's where you get that banding appearance or striated appearance.